Today we're jumping into a really interesting set of videos from a particular YouTube channel. The creator's been super open about a huge life change she's going through.
That's right. We've looked closely at these, well, very candid accounts. Our goal here is to really unpack that journey she's sharing, leaving a very long relationship, trying to find happiness again, dealing with challenges.
Doing it all online, right?
Exactly, sharing it with her community. So we want to give you a clear picture of this whole transition, pulling out the key moments and reflections she shared in those videos.
Okay, let's get straight into it. The big news, the thing that runs through these sources, is the end of a major chapter. She's separated from her husband, Paul, after 23 years together.
23 years, yeah. And she says they're heading towards divorce court now.
And she really doesn't hold back on the immediate aftermath, does she?
No, not at all. Like, she mentions Paul was actually staying there in the house on an air mattress for a bit. Yeah, because he apparently had nowhere else to go right away. It paints a very real picture of that initial disruption.
And her feelings about the relationship ending, they seem incredibly raw.
Very. She talks about feeling trapped for basically that whole time, 23 years, and she mentions experiencing what she calls mental and verbal abuse.
She even says she felt like a fool for staying so long.
And a point she brings up quite a bit, especially when talking about why it ended, is this feeling that her husband never really provided or did what she calls husband duties.
Right. What does that seem to mean, based on the videos?
Well, from the context, it sounds like a mix of things: financial support, maybe emotional support too, sharing responsibilities around the house, that kind of thing.
It's interesting, though, because she does bring up potential divorce grounds, like adultery and mental cruelty. Those are pretty serious terms.
They are, yeah. Often used in legal situations.
But then elsewhere, she also frames it differently, saying it felt kind of mutual, that they just grew apart because there were too many problems.
Exactly. And that, I think, shows how complicated it can be to process and talk about the end of such a long relationship, especially when you're sharing it online.
Yeah.
It's probably not just one single thing, even if legal terms get mentioned. Likely a mix of deep-seated issues and maybe that gradual drifting apart she talks about.
Okay, so moving beyond the why it ended, the sources show this really strong, almost immediate shift in her emotions. A huge sense of happiness, relief.
Oh, absolutely. It's striking. She says it feels like a house has been lifted.
Wow.
Yeah, and that she's so happy every morning. Everything's 100% better since the separation. It's such a stark contrast to feeling trapped.
And that relief seems to be physical too, right?
She brings up her blood pressure, says it was high because of all the stress in the relationship.
And
Now she feels it calming down, which, makes a lot of sense. Stress takes a toll.
so as she's kind of finding this new freedom, she also shares she's met someone.
Yes, someone new. She calls him her sweetheart or new partner-to-be.
And what do we know about this new connection from the sources?
Well, right now it's long distance. They haven't actually met in person yet, just texts and phone calls.
Okay.
And she adds this specific layer. They're deliberately waiting to be together physically until after the divorce is final.
Why is that?
She's really clear about wanting to do things right, her words, and she says she doesn't want to make themselves or God look bad.
So there's a strong moral or maybe spiritual element guiding her actions here.
Definitely. It seems really important to her, and how she wants to present this new chapter publicly adds another dimension to her choices for sure.
Right. But it's not all just happiness and new beginnings. The sources are also pretty honest about the ongoing challenges, the real world stuff.
Oh, for sure. Practical problems come up. Finding work is a big one she mentions.
And transportation seems linked to that.
Yes, exactly. She specifically says Paul's transportation was took from her, which makes the job hunt even harder. It ties back to that theme she mentioned earlier about, dependence and maybe lack of provision during the marriage.
That sounds tough. And her perspective on Paul's future, it's quite pointed.
It is. She actually says she feels pity for whoever might end up with him next.
Really?
Yeah, she says she thinks he wants a woman to keep him up and isn't really looking for an equal partner. It reinforces her view of him not being self-sufficient.
But even with all that history and those feelings,
Yeah.
she still wants to help him.
Apparently so. She mentions planning to help him get back on his feet, find a job. It shows, I think, a really complex mix of feelings, the past hurt, but maybe also some lingering sense of care or responsibility, or just wanting him to be okay, even after they've split.
Alongside all that, the practical stuff, the relationship fallout. She's also dealing with some significant health issues herself.
Yes, definitely. She talks about ongoing problems needing medical attention, heart issues specifically.
Serious ones.
Sounds like it. Mentions a potential pacemaker or stent, says she has tests scheduled.
Wow, that's a lot to handle at once.
It really is. And then there's chronic pain, knees, hips, back. She says it gets worse with the weather and keeps her from sleeping well.
And she connects some of this to the stress, right?
Mm-hmm. She explicitly mentions fibromyalgia flare-ups, and she links those flare-ups directly to stress and aggravation. So you can see how the emotional turmoil is like physically manifesting for her.
So she's got all this going on, the separation, the new relationship hopes, the practical struggles, the health problems, and she's putting it all out there on her YouTube channel.
Exactly. The channel is her way of updating everyone, sharing the big news, like the divorce, but also the day-to-day reality of it. Viewers get a very direct window.
And she seems to engage directly with viewer comments, even rumors.
Yeah, she does. There's an example where she actually shows on camera that Paul's new girlfriend isn't on her property, isn't allowed there, directly shutting down speculation.
And she addressed that whole Pauline character thing, too.
Right. She explained that came from a dare, acknowledged some people reacted negatively, maybe for religious reasons. And she kind of defends her own position, saying she's still Christian despite any criticism or judgment she gets from viewers.
It really highlights that tension, doesn't it? Sharing so much publicly.
Definitely. She's very transparent about the big life stuff, but she also draws lines. She says some details, like the really specific reasons for the divorce are just between her and Paul. Personal.
Which makes you think, where is that line for anyone sharing online, especially during vulnerable times?
It's a huge question. But despite maybe getting some negative feedback, she also sounds genuinely grateful for the support she does get. Oh, yeah. She thanks people for comments, prayers, says talking to her audience actually helps her, and she enjoys that connection.
And mixed in with all the big drama and updates, the sources give us these little glimpses into her everyday life, the color and texture, you could say.
Totally. Like, you get to watch her do her makeup routine. She's getting ready for a church event, and she shares all these specific tips.
Like what?
Things like avoiding dark makeup if you're older, using lipstick for eyebrows. Apparently that's a thing.
Right.
And a contouring trick to make her face look thinner. She even mentions specific products. It's just a very normal, everyday kind of moment she shares.
And the food. There are mukbang moments, too.
Yes. Eating pizza, sometimes sharing it with her pets, which is kind of sweet.
Bootsy gets pizza.
Bootsy apparently loves pizza, and she enjoys Popeyes, describing the chicken, the biscuits, the mac and cheese in detail. You get the sense these are little moments of pleasure for her amidst everything else.
Yeah, those simple things. And her pets seem important.
Very. Bootsy especially. Scared of storms, but clearly a big comfort. They pop up a lot.
She also shares some family background, right, from her past.
Some quite personal reflections on her parents. Talks about her mother lying to her, leading to trust issues, although she says she still loves her mom.
That sounds complicated.
Yeah. And she also mentions her father being abusive towards women, not towards his daughter, she says, but towards other women. It gives you some maybe background context for how she might view relationships and trust.
And the weather plays a role sometimes.
Right. She talks about a storm happening while she's filming, her dog being scared, and she relates it to her sister driving through a tornado recently and her own past experience with flooding. It just grounds the story in her actual physical world.
One last detail, she decided not to delete the old videos, the ones with Paul in them.
Yeah, she mentions that, sees them as part of her past, part of her life story, acknowledging where she came from, I guess, as she moves into this new phase.
So when you put it all together, this deep dive into her videos gives you this really raw, very candid look at someone navigating the end of something huge, that 23-year marriage, trying to start over.
Yeah, finding her own freedom, pursuing this new connection, but trying to do it based on her values, while also facing some really serious practical and health hurdles, and sharing it all so openly.
The big themes that jump out are, well, that search for happiness after a long time of feeling stuck.
Definitely, and that basic human need for stability, for genuine connection. Plus, it makes you think about the really complex ways people share their lives these days, especially during big transitions.
Okay, so thinking about everything we've seen in these sources, that strong desire for stability, for connection, her saying she wants to do things right this time, it leaves you with a final thought to chew on. What does it actually mean to build a life right, authentically on solid ground after you've been through significant loss and upheaval? both for yourself personally and maybe in how you present that new life to the world.